Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another Herald's Horn interview. On this one, I am joined by Gabe Pyle, an industrial design professor, a children's book author, and most importantly, my good friend who has relatively recently gotten quite into Magic the Gathering. It's been really fun to get to interact with and watch a new player learn Magic, interact with the systems, learn the vocabulary, all that kind of stuff. But I thought it would be interesting to bring him onto the podcast and kind of pick his brain about his experience with Magic. What about it appealed to him as a new player and what his overall experience has been like. He also has some advice for those of you out there who are trying to get your own friends into Magic the Gathering. Without any other further ado, let's get into this interview. Hello and welcome to the interview on the Herald's Horn. On this week, we are doing something a little different. This week, I am being joined by the one, the only, my friend, Gabe Pyle. Gabe, thank you for joining me here in the Herald's Horn.
Cal, thanks for having me.
So, Gabe is a great friend of mine, longtime friend of mine, who has recently, at long last, gotten bitten by the Magic the Gathering bug. I've been having a lot of fun playing with him, answering all of his questions, giving him all of the cards that I don't want and he wants out of my office. But Gabe's a smart guy. Gabe is an interesting man with many insights, and I figured it would be great to talk to him some about his experience as a new player in Magic the Gathering. I was going to say in 2025, but you started a little more like late 2024, really. So I wanted to pick his brain about some of the highs, some of the lows, what it's like, what's frustrating, what's fun, all that kind of stuff. Gabe, I want to start with a real hard question here.
All right.
But I would like to know, as a new Magic the Gathering player, what about Magic the Gathering has grabbed you the most? I've been proselytizing Magic the Gathering to all my friends for so long.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you resisted, more so that you just never actually tried. Once you tried, you were pretty all in. But what about it you think is so appealing to you?
Well, I do want to go back to something that you said about resisting, because there actually was some resistance at first, probably before you and I really started interacting. But I had known about Magic the Gathering.
I was going to say, you've been a nerd in nerd spaces for a long time.
Yeah, I knew about it, but there was something about, like, that was a new bracket of nerddom that I didn't feel like I was in just yet. But I felt similarly about Dungeons & Dragons, honestly. And your wife was one of the many people that got me into that. So then I was like, all right, okay, Dungeons & Dragons, this is pretty cool. I'm having a blast. But Magic is still too nerdy for me.
Sure.
And it was Gen Con a couple years ago where I was hanging out with you and Jen and Ethan, and we got to play a game, and you all walked me through a game of Magic. Jen had taught me how to play Dan.
Yeah, your first ever full game of Magic the Gathering was a game of Dan using my inscrutable deck. Yeah.
I couldn't understand a third of the cards. And that wasn't just because I was new to Magic and there were a lot of unfamiliar terms to me. Some of the cards legitimately were in other languages and were so shiny and reflective with signatures over top the text I could possibly read. I had to rely on Jen.
Great learning tool. Great learning tool.
Yeah, if I could get through that, then certainly everything else was going to be much easier. So that's kind of been my experience, was climb an immediate vertical cliff. That it was my learning curve. And then after that, everything's been kind of somewhat more steady after the initial learning cliff. But I remember thinking fondly after my first Magic experience, but still not feeling like I was ready to make the jump because it was so vast. I didn't know where to start. It took some time for... I think Lexi had introduced me to the idea of precons, and that felt more approachable to me. I thought, if I'm going to play, I think a precon is probably going to be the way. And then they released the Bloomborough series, and I love animals, and so that felt really approachable to me. And I thought I I'll try to get one. I tried to get one at Gen Con last year, 2024.
Those were gone.
They were gone so fast. I also was I had to be in the same line as the people who were trying to buy Secret Lair. And
sure.
so there was no chance for me to get even close to the front of the line. So I ended up buying the pre-con at our local game store, the Soldiery. And I had some familiarity with the game because I had played the Gen Con before. I believe you and Jen had probably let me use one of your decks. Lexi and you suggested I get on Arena, and so I became more and more familiar. But then playing with my first actual deck helped me really feel invested in it. And it didn't hurt that I was playing with Bello, Bard of the Brambles, who...
A really good pre-con.
A really, really good pre-con. And I think the first game I played with that against you all, it was either the first game or the second game, I smoked you all. And I felt amazing. I felt, of course I'm going to keep playing because...
I'm winning.
I'm winning, yeah. I want to keep going. And then a few other games later, I realized, all right, I do need to put some work in. I can't just let the deck work for me. I need to figure out the best way to lay my cards down. So after that, then I realized I could start trying to improve the deck, swapping out cards, and that got me feeling even more invested. One of the principles that I teach my students about is from William Lidwell's book, Universal Principles of Design, and he talks in that book about lots of reasons why we do the things that we do and how we can use those in designs. And one of the principles is the IKEA effect, the principle that if you put in effort to make something or improve something, then you're going to value it more. You're going to think that something is worth more because it is worth more to you because you actually put some sweat equity into it. Even though on the face it's just an assembly of parts. You just happen to be closer to it. So by integrating some cards and making some decisions for how I wanted to change the deck, maybe improve it, but change the deck, then I felt even more attached. So that has helped me get my foot in the door. And as I've been playing, I've just been learning all of the terms. And each time that I play with, especially you and Jen, there's something new that I discover. One of the one of the instances of learning something new was when you were playing. I can't remember what deck it was, but you had us milling cards. And I thought it was of no consequence. Well, not of no consequence. I knew I had fewer cards to pull from until I had maybe 7 cards left. And Jen said, "By the way, Gabe, when you're out of cards, you die." That's one of the ways you can lose the game.
Oh yes, this has never been relevant before. By the way.
And of course, I wouldn't have expected Jen to relay that information to me when she was teaching me Dan, because that's not relevant, especially to that deck or that game. But I was blindsided by that one, and
it's on me.
No, it's totally fair. It was an exciting victory because I remember you were able to use a card that normally you would not use to make players mill cards, but in that instance, it made sense for you to mill make me mill the rest of my deck. So I've been learning through trial and error, through making mistakes, and there have been times when I was playing with you and with Blake, and I was trying to do the math in my head about where to send my attackers, and I got it wrong. I didn't optimize the way that I should have sent it, and all that night and all the next day I was trying to figure out how could I...
Stupid.
Yes, if I make a mistake, what an idiot. I felt my brain growing by 2% as I was processing this information. But I think one of the things that I've had to get over is just the vast amount of variety that's available. Not just variety, but names and history and lore. I've heard you and Lexi and Jen discussing oh, you were running this commander, and you would say a name, and you all seem to know immediately what that meant. And I was like, I don't... It's like I'm watching a TV show, and I barely know who the characters...
You're stepping into episode 30.
Yes, episode
Yeah.
30 of season 5. And there are all these like running gags and recurring characters. And for me, it's all new. And I don't know the characters' names yet. I just know kind of what they do.
And is that like interesting and intriguing to you, or can it be off-putting and confusing and makes you feel a little left out, or a combo of both?
That is a great question. What makes me interested in the game of Magic is not the names and the characters, but the mechanics. So that's what you were discussing. You said, all right, this is the deck that I'm running. So you would say the name and you all understood the mechanics that were related to that. And so for me, I wasn't able to make that jump. And I'm like, I'm just getting the names. I'm getting a series of sounds that to me make no sense.
You have yet to get to connect names to, I was going to say names to faces, but
Yeah.
names to mechanics. Same thing, really.
Yeah. But I think that's what I like about it is that there are so many different ways to make a deck work. And so I have felt a little, I wouldn't say left out because that makes it seem like there's no malicious intent and there's not even like a really a social dynamic that needs to change for my sake. But it's just my inexperience of not yet knowing who these players are, but I'm still excited about the idea of learning how decks run. And I love playing against different decks. I'm still familiarizing myself with my deck and trying to optimize my deck. I've moved on from Bellow, Bard of the Brambles to Zimone, Paradox Sculptor. And so I'm just adding a lot of +1/+1 counters and then doubling them whenever I have an opportunity to do so. So I've been trying to learn more about how this deck works, but I've been playing against other decks and have really enjoyed seeing the variety of how people who have, even if they're running precons, but people have built their decks. The deck that Jen has built with 2 commanders is fascinating when you see that thing really cooking. Like,
Yeah, for the context listener, my wife Jen has a Mardu, Ravos and Elena deck that is all about casting lightning, skelemental, ball lightning, all the varietals, all of the like 2 and 3 drop, 6 power, 1 toughness, hasty trampling elementals that kill themselves at the end of the turn. And she has a bunch of cards that leverage the high power of the creatures for value, including Elena in the command zone, which taps for red for the highest power among creatures that have entered the battlefield under your control this turn. Play a ball lightning, make 6 red mana, go crazy, sacrifice it to draw cards equal to its power, blah, 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 blah. It's a really funny, weird, different deck.
It's an incredible deck. And even hearing you describe that, I knew all of the words that you said. But stringing them together, it's like I'm still grasping what that means.
Yes, definitely.
And so I've actually really appreciated you all as I've been learning, because you all have been playing for some time and you're far more familiar. You know the vernacular, not only in speaking, but also playing. And you have made me feel really accepted, especially as I am learning how to speak and how to play the game, and how I've been getting excited about things that maybe are less exciting to you because you've been more familiar with them, or it's not as cool as I think it is. But you've made me feel like I'm permitted to be excited about this discovery, and that's been really helpful and encouraging to me. So going back to your original question, what has it been like me entering the world of Magic? I've found a good pre-con that made me feel like I can do something, like I actually am capable of playing, and I have been playing with friends who are really accepting, and I've been fortunate to be able to pull some interesting potential commanders from packs so that I can start to build my own deck and really feel like I'm investing and getting something from my investment. So that's what it's been like for me.
Nice. Very nice. It is now interesting to compare what you're saying, how you feel about Magic now, to how you felt about Magic originally. Some of your resistance not only from, it's too high of a nerd level for me right now, but also it's so big, it's intimidating. Now that you're getting into it, it's so big, it's intriguing.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that's correct. And I think what made the difference is I had a place to start. I was able to start digesting a small part of it, which helped me understand the rest of the framework and where I needed to continue to build my understanding of how all these things relate to each other. But this part, I feel like I'm starting to understand a little bit of this small portion here, and now I can start attaching the new knowledge to the existing knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And I think pre-constructed decks definitely help with that a lot because, like, yeah, then as soon as you learn the basic rules of the game, you know, oh, you draw a card every turn. This is how lands work. Here's how you cast a spell. This is what a creature does. Past that point, in theory, playing Magic the Gathering can be as quote unquote easy as reading the cards and asking some clarifying questions. A lot of clarifying questions. I still have to ask clarifying questions about stuff in Magic the Gathering. Yeah, and then with the pre-constructed deck, it's not like you're looking at every single part of Magic history. You get to look at 100 cards. I think that's one of the interesting things that I have observed, I think, like with you and with some of the other, you know, newer players that I've played with throughout time, like our friend Blake, Lexi, even toward the beginning of the time that we were playing together, and they had seen less of Magic in general and that kind of stuff. I think Commander is unfortunately a very hard, sorry to all of the new players out there like Gabe, Commander is a much harder way to learn Magic the Gathering than a lot of us did. I learned Magic the Gathering with like a deck that my buddy handed me, and there were 60 cards and there were a lot of multiples and there was just two of us. And the cards I had to worry about were the cards I had and the cards he had and what he did on his turn and what I did on my turn. And now the easiest, because it's the most accessible way for a lot of people to even get introduced to Magic in the first place, Commander is like, all right, here you have 100 cards and I have 100 cards and they have 100 cards and they have 100 cards. We probably have 350 unique cards between us. And we're going to play a game. And you have to absorb all of this information.
Yes, it is a bit of drinking from a fire hose at the beginning. But I think one of the fun things about... I know the different mana play styles have they have different play styles. I know the different colors have different play styles, but I feel like Commander also really amplifies the personality of a deck. Each deck has its own personality, and then especially playing against three other decks that have a very different personality. I think that's one of the things that is really intriguing to me is, my deck is the way that I play cards is completely different than the way that Cal, you would play your cards. You're going wide. You're creating a bunch of tokens. I'm over here trying to make my two creatures as big as they can possibly be, and hope I can give them trample and then take you out. Meanwhile, Jen is like flipping her deck upside down and then pulling a card from the middle and being like, okay, this one has a 7 on it, which means that 7 points times 7 goes to all of you. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing over there. It's shocking and amazing, but everything. And then of course Blake's deck is, I'm just going to make my creature freakier and keep mutating them. And it's really cool to see all of the different styles at the table. And you said 350 cards unique among us, but we don't get through all of them. And so each time we play, we're maybe seeing 200 total cards. And so every time we play, it's going to be a different experience. And that's one of the things that I've really liked about playing with the same group as well, is each time it really is a different game.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting earlier hearing you talk a little bit about like even not just like the card names, because I think like card names are something that it's at least theoretically easy to learn, that in that if you hear a card name and you don't know what it does, then you can like probably just look it up or whatever. But there's also so many cultural things around Magic the Gathering, and so many things have like random slang names. Cards have slang names. Concepts in the game have slang names, and I have been playing Magic the Gathering for Magic the Gathering has been my main hobby longer than you have been a full-time professor, Gabe. So it's just like I've been around the I've been around the block a little bit. And so these things, I use Magic the Gathering vernacular in my day-to-day life in a conversation, and people are like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, oh, brother. Yeah, people don't know what it means to be on the beat down. So I hope you can learn all of that just fine, Gabe.
I think you all will get me caught up real quick. I even was able to use turn terminology when Jen and our friend Kimberlyn and I were playing D&D, Lexi being the DM. We were discussing when you get your reaction back on a turn, and I said, oh, it's at the upkeep of your turn. And Jen's like, you absolute nerd. And she said, but honestly, Magic makes sense to use because it has such precise language for describing how you interact with actions.
The upkeep of your turn.
Yeah, that's when you get your reaction back. I think. I'm sure someone, I could totally be wrong, and someone get in the comments if I'm incorrect on that.
You have to tell us in the comments. Give us engagement. Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, Gabe.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to ask you before we shift gears, what has it been like for you? You've been around the block.
Yeah.
And what has it been like for you to see new players begin to enter the world of Magic the Gathering?
I think I kind of already mentioned this a little bit. I kind of feel for new players. I cannot imagine what it's like to get into Magic the Gathering now, because to me, like, the Magic product is in many ways like inscrutable to me. In a lot of ways, and that product comes out so fast, I can barely keep track of it. There's so many new cards. Like, around the time that I was in college, I had a basically memorized encyclopedic knowledge of basically every single card that had come out in the last 6 years. And someone like shows me a piece of art or says a name, and I could be like, oh yeah, that is a 1-drop 0/6 vanilla from Theros. That's what that does. I don't know why I know that. It's because I drafted a lot of Theros. But like, there was a point in time when I knew every Magic card, and that's kind of just how invested Magic the Gathering players worked, actually. But it's just such a different world for me. Like, even like I said, I could not imagine trying to play the game Magic for like the first or second or 10th time in a Commander game. Holy, so it has been really interesting interacting with people like you and our friend Gabe are like my two biggest kind of touch points right now, because you're the two people that I've known personally, first two people in a long time that I've known personally that I've got to see get into the game. But it is also really interesting seeing people like you grab onto Magic, and then you get to really grab onto the part that I think Commander is strongest at, which is like personalization and learning a really wide range of things, getting to see a lot, getting to see what other people are into. Because for the longest time, my investment level with the game, which was something I enjoyed, was basically a purely competitive pursuit. Granted, not at a very high level, but my engagement with the game was show up on a Sunday and do a competitive draft, and show up at the store on Friday, and I will be playing competitive one-on-one matches that are all based on like meta-gamed decks against other opponents. And that's a thing that appeals to a lot of people. It's still really popular ways of playing Magic, but if I had to guess, it's probably not a way of playing Magic that would appeal to you all that much, at least in comparison to this.
Yeah, I would say not yet, at least.
Sure. and that's interesting, because like, if that was the only option, then there's maybe a world where you just never become a new Magic player in the first place, unless that was our only way of interacting with it. And I was like, oh, Gabe, let's play this game. And then you enjoyed the game enough to jump into the rest of it. But it's very interesting for me to hear you talk about enjoying getting to express personality and see what other people are doing in their like creative pursuits in deck building and that kind of stuff, when all of that is very much in a lot of ways the byproduct of Commander being the most popular format. And that has only been the thing for like the last 3 to 5 years, like tail end of when I would have, what year is it?
2025.
Yeah, 2019, 2020 is kind of when it feels like the large sea change happened. So the last 4 or 5 years of Commander being the dominant format. And so it's like, in the grand scheme of Magic history, we're on year, we're on year 32 now. So in Magic's 32-year history, we're, 4 to 5 years is not all that long of a period. You're kind of the peak enjoyment that you're getting out of Magic is actually something that's relatively new in the grand scheme of things, which is very interesting to me. But
I wonder if I'm sure this is information that we could look up, but I wonder if precons and or Commander being such a popular format is part of why people felt comfortable.
I would
a result of it.
I would 1000% say that like Commander becoming more of the dominant format is directly related to the newfound like very widespread popularity of Magic the Gathering in the last 4 to 5 years. Because it is on another level popular, another level successful in that time period compared to what it was before. And it is very much because before that, your options for playing Magic were either like the most casual. We have cards that like a lot of people have for the longest time played what like might have been called like kitchen table Magic, which was just like, you have some Magic cards and I have some Magic cards. Let's throw them at each other and see what happens. Or your other option for playing was pretty much like you could play in competitive formats. And there were other kind of casual formats, but none of them really caught on that much until Commander became outsized popular. And I think you're onto something there, Gabe.
We have our students create user personas when they're designing something, because when you're selling something to someone, or designing something to be sold, you want to focus on the face of someone that you actually can sell to. So what I'm proposing is perhaps Commander, the decks having a face. Like it is the personality of, for me, this raccoon. Okay, all right, I like this raccoon, and this raccoon can get me into the game. Whereas before, when I was gaining an understanding of the game, it was like, okay, the red, if you want to play with red, this is the kind of game you're going to play. If you want to play with blue, this is the kind of game you want to play. And that didn't feel as personal to me. It felt like you get to play the game because you like the game. But this one, with my introduction, I got to play the game because I like the idea of animals. I grew up and I read Redwall. And so for me, that felt familiar. It felt nostalgic. And I had a personal connection to the story that I felt like I was beginning to be involved in through this raccoon deck. So what I'm proposing is there's a chance that Commander's having a face, a identity, is one of the reasons that people feel like they can get invested in the game, because it certainly worked that way for me.
Definitely. And also then as you continue to work on that deck, then it becomes more and more personalized to you. It becomes more and more of an expression of your preferred playstyle, your preferred cards, your et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're talking about customer profiles. Reminded me of, for the longest time, Mark Rosewater is the lead designer of Magic the Gathering. He is an extremely prolific writer about the game. And all the way, it's so fascinating to me. They have 6 like wide, kind of scheming, wide ranging profiles for players that they've had even since like the early 2000s that they work off of. And this is, I'll explain them to you, Gabe. And I'm assuming a lot of our listeners haven't heard about them too, because knowing everything what Mark Rosewater says about the game is inside baseball stuff. They have 3 psychographic profiles and 3 aesthetic profiles. Psychographic profiles being like exploring why players enjoy playing the game, and the aesthetic profiles exploring what players enjoy of the game, or I think like what Mark would say is like why they think it's beautiful as opposed to like interesting. And the 3 psychographic profiles of like why players enjoy the game, they have 3 characters. There's Timmy and Tammy, who are like people who like using big creatures, casting huge spells. They want to have like one big, large, exciting play, or perhaps you could say put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on a guy and hopefully give him trample and
I can
swing it in.
To Timmy and or Tammy.
Yep. And then there's Johnny and Jenny, who are those who like to like build complex and creative and like interesting decks that like there's a lot of interactions and all of my cards interact with each other in these layered ways and all that kind of stuff. But they say that like Johnny specifically uses magic as a form of self-expression, like they're showing off with their cleverness, or they're trying to show you something interesting that they came up with, and similar. And then the third psychographic profile is Spike, who is the competitive player. Their motivation to play the game is to be good at the game and beat other people. They will play whatever the best deck is, copy decks off the internet, borrow other people's decks. They don't care. And what is so fascinating about that, the aesthetic ones are Melvin and Melanie, who are focused on like the beauty of the design of the game. I'm a Mel for sure. Vorthos is the flavor. Vorthos people are people who care about the story. They keep up with the flavor of the worlds. They read all the stories that come out. They know all the characters, that kind of stuff. And then there's like a joke. There's a joke player type called Trivia. There's only actually 2 aesthetic profiles, but then there's also, they came up with a third joke one called Trivia for the people out there who just like to know every fact they can about Magic the Gathering. That's my friend Zeb. Love you, Zeb. But it is so fascinating to me that for so long, even though in 2002 is when Mark Rosewater said, hey guys, we've determined that these 3 major profiles exist. Here's my write-up about them. And ever since then, they have kind of designed to those 3 different archetypes.
Yeah.
For the longest time, if you wanted to play Magic the Gathering in a way that was like kind of officially endorsed or guided by Wizards of the Coast, the option was being a Spike or participating in those activities in a suboptimal way in your Timmy, Tammy, and like Johnny, Jenny tint. And I think that what Commander maybe really does then is give people an outlet to, obviously these profiles are pretty reductive. There's there's subgroups inside of each that you could do. Like, Johnny and Jenny would combine both the people who are trying to win the game on turn 3 with a really cool combo, or people who put together a really interesting deck that could lay out elf culture or whatever, But interesting that you brought that up, Gabe, because I had not thought about that until right now.
So that leads me to kind of a question that I'm going to hand to you, and you're welcome to hand it back to me if you'd like my thoughts on it. I'm willing to bet that most of the people listening to this podcast are more like you, where they have a lot of familiarity with the game, and probably less like people like me who are new to the game and still trying to figure out what all should I be consuming, what media for Magic the Gathering do I actually want to consume. So for people who are listening who maybe have friends or family who are maybe resistant or possibly on the cusp of being interested, what might you say to them, considering your experience getting me into the game, getting Blake into the game, teaching Aubrey how to play recently? What might you say to these people?
People who are almost into it?
No, people who like Magic and are interested in getting their friends.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
What would I tell them? Man.
Or advice you would give them.
Advice I would give them. I think my number one piece of advice I would give them is if you can get someone to sit down to play a game of Magic with you, you can start simple. You don't have to explain the whole game to them. You can walk them through a turn, give them a deck that has creatures and lands in it, and you can start there. But I think that figuring out something that I heard from someone else before that I personally really enjoyed and like is figure if that person is already like a nerd of some type, which, if they're interested in Magic the Gathering, or you think they'd be interested in Magic the Gathering to get into a relatively complicated fantasy game, they probably have to be some level of nerd to begin with. Let's get that out of the way. In my experience, it is very helpful if you can, as their friend, figure out the other type of similar stuff they like, whether it be this game, that game. Oh, they really like elves. They really like dwarves, and that kind of stuff. I think it really, really helps if you can, from the very beginning, just push them in a direction and be like, hey, I know you are freakishly obsessed with dwarves. Well, hey, check this out.
Yeah.
You can play with all of these doors in Magic the Gathering. That's the way that a lot of people get into Magic the Gathering, is they're like, you know, I really like dogs, and someone showed to me that you could make a deck out of all dogs, and I played my all dogs deck, and now I play this other stuff. Well, even our mutual friend our mutual friend Blake, who is a newer Magic the Gathering player as well. He has always had the Otrimi, Precon, which for some godforsaken reason he fell in love with and refuses to give up. You and Blake don't know this, but Mutate is one of the most hated mechanics of all time.
I feel like I picked that up when we were playing one time. You may have said something that made me think that.
A lot of people are not into Mutate, but our friend Blake is so into Mutate, and I'm happy for him, and I'm sad for him because they're never going to print another Mutate card again for him to put into that deck. But it's so interesting. Like, he was interested in it, I think, because he maybe wanted something to do with me, and he likes games in general and that kind of stuff. So he started playing, but even from the very beginning, he was like, man, you told me there was Godzilla. I've got to make a Godzilla deck. And it took him a while to get around to it, but he has that Godzilla deck now, and it makes him the happiest guy in the world.
I don't think I've played against the Godzilla deck.
It's only come out once or twice.
Okay.
I think it's almost ready for its grand debut. But,
okay.
But I think that is the advice I would start with. Find something that they can resonate with.
Yeah.
And give that to them. And then if you reach the point of teaching them the game, please just walk them through how lands and creatures work. And then you can go from there. You don't need so many people like to sit down and they're like, all right, so the phases of a turn are the upkeep, the untap, and the draw, and then the main phase and the combat, and the main phase and the end step. Mm-hmm. And in the end step, if you have more than 7 cards, you have to discard a hand size. Okay, so we're going to get you 7 cards. Okay, look, there's 5 different card types here. Let's walk through what each of them do. Uh-huh. All right, so that makes Magic a very overwhelming game.
Yes, it's quite obtuse to try to learn everything in sequence.
Yes.
When the interesting bit is not the order of the turns. The order of the turns are just how the game
works.
Yeah.
Gabe, I will turn that same question back to you. You are a newer player. You are much closer to this experience. What advice would you give someone? What advice would you give Cal of 6 months ago?
I wouldn't even say advice. What I can do is I can celebrate the ways that you have invited me in and made me feel like I can be a part of this group. And that's one of the things is I have felt so safe and comfortable learning and getting excited about things. And I'm sure I've made little jokes that are like new to me. And I'm sure you have either heard them 100 times or they're just not that interesting. I remember you tweeted a picture of me having taken out Jen with a burnished heart. And I didn't know that was a big deal. I didn't realize that that's not really a creature you swing at someone. And in that, so there was that. You didn't make me feel like I was playing the game wrong because I did something that is atypical. But then in the comments, someone was like, "Whoa, the lands are on top," and I didn't know the lands weren't supposed to go on. It makes sense now. Standing on land,
yeah,
I understand now. But that was another moment where I realized, like, you've never made me feel bad for not knowing how to play the game or make a mistake in the game. You've allowed me to make mistakes, and one of the, and I know that I do this if I introduce someone to a new game. One of our temptations when we see someone struggling and we know how to do something is we want to jump in and say, "Oh no, what you should do is this," and we try to play the turn for them, and that shuts people down. I've played Pandemic with people, and
yeah, the quarterbacking problem.
Yeah, and so everyone is able to, like, that's part of the game is you can advise on how other people should use their turn. But when it becomes other people telling other people what they should be doing with their turn, then it's like, why am I playing the game? I'm not enjoying this. So you've allowed me to take my time, figure stuff out, make mistakes, and learn, and that has made me feel really, really welcome, and I appreciate that. Then going back to the customer profiles, I would say, and this is, like you said, inside baseball, so this is kind of next level. If you're trying to sell someone, then you can think about this. figure out what it is that they would actually enjoy about the game. For me, the trivia was exactly the thing that would put me off at the beginning. I thought, there are so many things to know. I don't want to know all those things. Those facts don't mean anything to me. But I can make big creatures? Okay, that's interesting. So if you have a friend who like really, really enjoys the kinds of games where every time a turn happens, like, okay, the rules are a little bit different now, then lean on that. One of my favorite games is Betrayal at House on the Hill, because every time you play the game, you get a different ending scenario. And so there's always something new, and the rules are always going to change slightly based on how the game plays out. So for me, that's what interests me in Magic. But if you like someone who's just really captivated by story, they love story, then I would say, all right, I can't remember which persona profile it was. It wasn't Mel. It may have been
Vorthos.
Vorthos?
Vorthos.
That was from the customer profiles?
Yeah, it's the people who are really into story.
Okay, well, Vorthos, yeah. Then you can say, all right, my friend's probably a Vorthos player. Let me tell them the story. I still have no idea what the story is. I know that there are some reoccurring characters, like the Planeswalkers. They keep showing up. And I'll eventually learn the names, and I'll be able to rewind to season 1 of the show. Maybe not even season 1, but I'll be able to rewind and read kind of the notes on what happened, what was the interesting bits, and why these characters are important. But I would say make people feel like they are allowed to make mistakes and discover the game for themselves, and let them feel like you're excited that they're learning new things. I remember you very early on looking through my Zamone deck, and Jen had made some comment about you, and you, she's like, hey, Cal, we got to get going. And you said something to the effect of, hang on, I'm getting excited about a new player learning Magic. And that made me feel so affirmed that you were interested in what I was doing. So I think that would probably be what I could celebrate about you bringing me into the game, as well as my advice for other people who might want to do as you have done, bring their friends into the game and play Magic with their friends, is just let them make mistakes and let them know that you want them there.
Well, Gabe, thank you. I appreciate those kind words very much.
Absolutely. And they were no trouble to say, because that's just the way things go. It's the truth.
And good advice, too, I would say. Just follow my lead on everything.
Yes. Like advice, be like
Don't do that!
Number 1 rule.
Number 1 rule. Listen to Cal. Listen to Cal. Gabe, I wanted to change gears here a little bit.
Sure.
And I was interested in asking you about, you are enjoying celebrating Magic in the oldest way possible. You are enjoying Magic often in the newfangled, for me, way. You're enjoying Magic a lot in the oldest possible way. You're really into cracking packs, Gabe. What's up with that?
Oh, well, I would say that season perhaps has passed.
Sure. Yes.
I think I do like the little dopamine boost of getting something new. The moment before you know what you're about to get, that's the highest level of dopamine.
And you're like, oh, I already have 6 of this card.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I have to put it somewhere.
Yes. So there were a few things that contributed to me going pack crazy, and that was I started realizing I could buy packs around Bloomburrow, and so I knew there were a lot of other creatures that I just didn't see in my precon deck, and so I wanted to see more of them. Another reason that incentivized me to keep going is I found a mythic rare in my very first one. It was the the owl that is like the antagonist of the Bloomburrow story. That makes all creatures have base toughness 1/1.
I can't remember their name.
Yeah, it's Feathers Knight, I think, is the last part of the card. But I remember showing that to you and Lexi, and you being both...
Maha. M-A-H-A.
Yeah. Again, a series of sounds that strung together don't yet mean anything to me.
Yep.
But I found that, and you both were like, "Whoa, this is a good card." And so I was like, "Oh, getting good cards is that easy? I'm gonna keep going." And then I realized, oh no, I actually was very fortunate on my first few packs. But then it was probably about a month ago. I saw a meme shared where I think it's a comic strip of Jesus speaking to some Pharisees, and it's gotten recreated so many times.
Oh yes.
But in this panel, Jesus was saying to the Pharisees, "Stop buying packs. You need to be buying singles." And the Pharisees did not want to hear that. And that's when I realized, hang on, am I a Pharisee? Maybe I should be buying singles. And so that's when I've switched to.
So you are now an experienced Magic the Gathering player. You have made the jump from pack buyer to singles buyer. You've done it. You've evolved.
Thank you. I will say I still like to buy a pack every once in a while, mostly because I just don't have as many cards. I see how many cards you have, and I think I need to up my game.
Gabe, you can have them. You can take them. I have too many. I can't get rid of them fast enough.
You're making it sound like it's a curse, and so because of that, I will probably decline. But you have to get
No, it's great. It's great. I'm just trying to share the love.
Oh, in that case. No, you've been very generous as you've been sorting through your cards. For me, I'm like, man, I really could use some more artifacts that get me mana. And you're like, I have 500. Which one would you like?
Which varietal of a 3-drop rock would you like in your deck? Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to do that. It's fun to build decks with people. It's nice.
It is.
That is one of the nice things about having a bunch of cards is that I don't need them and I can just give them to other people who would use them.
Yeah, you get a double blessing. You get the joy of having received the card at first, but then you also get the joy of passing that card on to someone like me, who then experiences the joy of having received the card.
Well, Gabe, somehow we're running out of time already. I thought we had been talking for 20 minutes, but no, it has been 45 to 50. So I have 2 more questions for you before we go. Same 2 questions I have everyone else. I'm going to ask you about your hobbies outside of Magic. We're going to do that here in a second. It's going to go on the Patreon. And then the final question that I ask everyone on our way out. Is there anything else that you would love to leave the listeners of the Herald's Horn with? It can be anything.
I think if I could leave your listeners with anything else, it's that gaming spaces in particular, are special in that I've seen a lot of kindness in gaming spaces. Of course, anything that has a degree of competition to it can turn toxic. Any kind of fandom can turn toxic. But I think getting people to play games it's something important to society, to our culture. We've been doing it as long as we have had as long as humans have been able to play. The concept of getting together to play has been something that even as adults we do. It's something that other creatures don't do into adulthood, but humans do. We keep playing, and that's important. And whatever you're feeling about the current times, whatever season you're going through right now, gaming and finding people to play games with is going to make the world, your world and their world, the other people that you play with, a better place. So keep it a good place. Keep it a safe place. The things that keep me would keep me on the outside of a gaming space is just that I didn't know much about Magic. But there are a lot of other people who feel like maybe they aren't welcome. Make everyone feel welcome, and that's something that Cal, again, I really appreciate about you. You make people feel welcome, and if more gaming spaces can be like the spaces that you've invited me into, I think we're all going to be okay.
Gabe, thank you very much, and thank you so much for coming on to the Herald's Horn.
Cal, thanks for having me. This was an absolute blast to talk with my buddy about something that is new and exciting to me for about an hour.
Yes, indeed. About an hour. Look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We will be back on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye.